Reading from Bhagavad-gītā as it is, chapter 4, which is titled Transcendental Knowledge. Today we are reading text 2. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Evaṁ paramparā-prāptam imaṁ rāja-ṛṣayo viduḥ sa kāleneha mahatā yogo naṣṭaḥ paran-tapa evam. Thus, paramparā, by disciplic succession, prāptam, received, imam, this science, rāja-ṛṣayaḥ, the saintly kings, viduḥ, understood, saha, that knowledge, kālena, in the course of time, iha, in this world, mahatā, great, yogaḥ, the science of one's relationship with the Supreme, naṣṭaḥ, scattered, paran-tapa, O Arjuna, subduer of the enemies. Translation. This supreme science was thus received through the chain of disciplic succession, and the saintly kings understood it in that way. But in course of time, the succession was broken, and therefore the science, as it is, appears to be lost. Purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. It is clearly stated that the Gita was especially meant for the saintly kings because they were to execute its purpose in ruling over the citizens. Certainly, Bhagavad-gītā was never meant for the demonic persons who would dissipate its value for no one's benefit and would devise all types of interpretations according to personal whims. As soon as the original purpose was scattered by the motives of the unscrupulous commentators, there arose the need to reestablish the disciplic succession. 5,000 years ago, it was detected by the Lord Himself that the disciplic succession was broken, and therefore He declared that the purpose of the Gita appeared to be lost. In the same way, at the present moment also, there are so many editions of the Gita, especially in English, but almost all of them are not according to authorized disciplic succession. There are innumerable interpretations rendered by different mundane scholars, but almost all of them do not accept the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, although they make a good business on the words of Śrī Kṛṣṇa. This spirit is demonic because demons do not believe in God, but simply enjoy the property of the Supreme. Since there is a great need of an edition of the Gita in English, as it is received by the paramparā, disciplic succession system, an attempt is made herewith to fulfill this great want. Bhagavad-gītā, accepted as it is a great boon to humanity. But if it is accepted as a treatise of philosophical speculations, it is simply a waste of time. Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuram Militam Yenam Tasmai Śrī Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Sayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavanscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Harijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sutta Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Evascha Vatitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Again, the translation. This supreme science was thus received through the chain of disciplic succession, and the saintly kings understood it in that way. But in course of time, the succession was broken, and therefore the science, as it is, appears to be lost. So this Bhagavad-gītā is spoken right before the Battle of Kurukshetra. And the Battle of Kurukshetra is the culmination of the great story, the Mahabharata. In that story, we know that there are the sons of Pandu and the sons of Dhritarashtra. And the sons of Pandu, Yudhisthira and Bhima, were the eldest. And so they had the first claim to the throne. And by their qualification also, they were outstanding. And it was their right to be the next king. But because their father had died untimely, his brother Dhritarashtra was made the king, but he was made as like the acting king because he was blind. And due to his blindness, he was not actually fit to be the king. But Dhritarashtra, he was overly lenient with his eldest son, Duryodhana. And Duryodhana was an envious person. And it was not Duryodhana's right to take the throne. But because his father was on the throne, he always coveted that he wanted to be on the throne. And so he made so many problems for the Pandavas. He, as a young boy, he tried to poison Bhima by poisoning his food. He tried to kill all of the Pandavas in a fire in the house of lac. And then finally, the kingdom of Hastinapur was divided into two. That consideration was made that, okay, let the Pandavas take half and let the sons of Dhritarashtra take half, and in that way we'll settle the conflict that is always arising between them. And when they had done that, the Pandavas were given the useless half of the kingdom. They were given the jungles and the forests, not the cities, not the developed places. They were given places that were basically uninhabitable. But the Pandavas were so highly qualified so incredibly empowered that they established the city of Indraprastha. Maharaj Yudhisthira, he conquered all the directions with the help of his brothers. They conquered Jarasandha, that story is there in the Krishna book. And then they had the rāja-ṛṣayaḥ sacrifice. And by having that rāja-ṛṣayaḥ sacrifice, it was established that Yudhisthira was the emperor of the whole world. And Duryodhana couldn't tolerate the success of his elder cousin brothers. And so he deviously brought them for a gambling match. And instead of personally wielding the dice, he had his uncle Shakuni, the brother of Gandhari. He was like considered, the greatest dice thrower of the time. All of these different characters, they had their different empowerments. Arjuna was the greatest archer and maybe the greatest warrior. Yudhisthira was empowered with all the qualities to be the greatest monarch. So this Shakuni, his special qualification was his dice throwing. There was practically no contest, but especially out of obedience to his elders, because Dhritarashtra was on the throne and he was sanctioning this dice match. So Yudhisthira agreed, okay, he should not neglect this challenge, because even Dhritarashtra, he is like my father, so we should play. And in that gambling match, they lost everything. They lost all of their wealth, all of their kingdom. It was all taken by Duryodhana. Even it became so outrageous that even his brothers were taken, and even their wife Draupadi was taken and humiliated in a very horrible way. Anyway, at the end of that gambling match, there was some reconciliation, and they agreed that, okay, the Pandavas will go to exile. And during that exile, Arjuna, he collected many very important, valuable weapons, like from Shiva, from Indra, and in that way prepared himself from what seemed like an inevitable fight. And so when that exile was completed, then still the Duryodhana, he wouldn't return their kingdom. He wouldn't give back anything, although that was the agreed upon stipulation. He wouldn't give back, he said, I will not give them even land that you can put one needle into. And so there had to be a fight. There was attempts at diplomacy, attempts to stop the war, but it seemed inevitable. Krishna says, what is that? Paritranaya sarunam vinishaya chaduskritam dharma samstapanartaya sambhavami yuge yuge. To deliver the pious and to annihilate the miscreants, as well as to re-establish the principles of religion, I myself appear millennium after millennium. So this war is like an extension of Krishna's attempt to annihilate the miscreants. And all of the sons of Dhritarashtra were annihilated. Because the king, Krishna wanted to re-establish religion, that the king should be the representative of God. It should not be that the king is an envious person. It should be someone that will represent God, that will represent religion, and that will create a favorable atmosphere among the citizens to progress towards the goal of human life, which is self-realization. And so Krishna is saying here, this supreme science was thus received through the chain of disciplic succession, and the saintly kings understood it that way. Imam rājarṣayo viduḥ. The point is, this Bhagavad-gītā is not just for the the reclusive saints and sadhus. It is for the kings. It is for the rulers also. It is for those people that are governing society. Prabhupada writes, it is clearly stated that the Gita was especially meant for the saintly kings because they were to execute its purpose in ruling over the citizens. So it was unacceptable that an envious person who is out for his own profit and aggrandizement, even at the great cost of others, that such a person like Duryodhana, that he should sit on the throne. It should be a saintly person, a saintly king, a self-realized person. He should be on the throne. There's a nice conversation. Srila Prabhupada is discussing with India's ambassador to Sweden in 1973. This is a book called the Hare Krishna Challenge. And Srila Prabhupada is speaking. This conversation is titled The Secular State. And very nice points that are very relevant Srila Prabhupada makes. Srila Prabhupada says, in America and India and so many other countries all over the world, they have a, quote, secular state. The government leaders say they don't want to favor any particular religion, but actually they are favoring irreligion. So America, India, Srila Prabhupada is mentioning, they're considered as secular democracies, secular states. There should be a separation between the church and the state. That is what they say. And the point is that, religion can cause conflicts, so better the government have nothing to do with religion. But then Prabhupada is saying, but actually what ends up happening is that irreligion becomes favored and irreligion becomes promoted. So the ambassador says, well, we have a problem. We have a multi-religious society, so we people in government have to be careful. We can't take too strong a position on religion. Srila Prabhupada says, no, the government must take a strong position. Of course, the government should be neutral to all forms of bona fide religion, but it also has a duty to see that the people are genuinely religious, not that in the name of a, quote, secular state, the government should let the people go to hell. Maybe you're observing in the development of our secular democracies, what is the state of religion? What is the state of morality? How are things moving? Are people becoming more saintly? Are people becoming elevated in the mode of goodness, elevated in spiritual consciousness? Our observation is exactly the opposite. At lightning speed, things are going down. Ambassador says, well, that's true. Srila Prabhupada says, yes, if you are a Muslim, then it is the duty of the government to see that you are really acting as a Muslim. If you are a Hindu, it is the government's duty to see that you are acting as a Hindu. If you are a Christian, it is the government's duty to see that you are acting as a Christian. The government cannot give up religion. Dharmena hina pashubi samana. If people become irreligious, then they are simply animals. So it is the government's duty to see that the citizens are not becoming animals. The people may profess different forms of religion. That doesn't matter, but they must be religious. Secular state doesn't mean that the government should be callous. Let the people become cats and dogs without religion. If the government doesn't care, then it isn't a good government. Nice comments from Srila Prabhupada. The thing is, unless you are actually following religious principles, you cannot possibly have good moral conduct. Bhagavatam says, one who has unflinching devotion to God consistently manifests all godly qualities, but one who has no such devotion must always be concocting schemes for exploiting the Lord's material external energy, and so he can have no good moral qualities whatsoever. In Bhagavatam also, we hear about how Maharaj Yudhisthira, how he was ruling. So after the Kurukshetra battle, all of the sons of Dhritarashtra were killed. The Pandavas were re-established on the throne. And Maharaj Yudhisthira, he ruled for 36 years. And Bhagavatam describes how he ruled. Maharaj Yudhisthira, after being enlightened by what was spoken by Bhishma Dev and Lord Śrī Kṛṣṇa the Infallible, engaged himself in matters of perfect knowledge because all his misgivings were eradicated. Thus he ruled over the earth and seas and was followed by his younger brothers. So after the war, Kurukshetra, millions of people were killed in that war. There's one purport in Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada says, I think 640 or 660 million people died at Kurukshetra. It may be a hard number to absolutely fix. There's different takes on that, but Srila Prabhupada writes something like that. So Maharaj Yudhisthira, just like Arjuna was confused about his duty before the war, Maharaj Yudhisthira also was confused about his duty after the devastating battle of Kurukshetra. And so Krishna arranged that he spoke to his elder Bhishma Dev, who was still lying on the battlefield on a bed of arrows. And Bhishma Dev enlightened Maharaj Yudhisthira and gave him full confidence to move forward in his duty to serve as the king. So Srila Prabhupada says something about the difference between the modern executive heads and the kings. The modern elected executive head of state is just like a puppet because he has no kingly power. Even if he is enlightened like Maharaj Yudhisthira, he cannot do anything out of his own good will due to his constitutional position. Therefore, there are so many states over the earth quarreling because of ideological differences or other selfish motives. But a king like Maharaj Yudhisthira had no ideology of his own. He had but to follow the instructions of the infallible Lord and the Lord's representative and the authorized agent, Bhishma Dev. So Yudhisthira has no personal agenda. He's an ideal king because he's not following either his own personal need for power and sense gratification. He's not following his own theories and ideas. Just he's following the Supreme Lord. He is a saintly king that is taking direction from Krishna, taking direction from Shastra, and therefore his rule is perfect. It's when people mix in their own motives, their own ideas and interpretations, that's when the problems start. It is instructed in the Shastras that one should follow the great authority and the infallible Lord without any personal motive and manufactured ideology. Therefore, it was possible for Maharaj Yudhisthira to rule the whole world, including the seas, because the principles were infallible and universally applicable to everyone. The conception of one world state can only be fulfilled if we can follow the infallible authority. An imperfect human being cannot create an ideology acceptable to everyone. Only the perfect and the infallible can create a program which is applicable at every place and can be followed by all in the world. It is the person who rules and not the impersonal government. If the person is perfect, the government is perfect. If the person is a fool, the government is a fool's paradise. That is the law of nature. There are so many stories of imperfect kings or executive heads. Therefore, the executive head must be a trained person like Maharaj Yudhisthira, and he must have the full autocratic power to rule over the world. The conception of a world state can take shape only under the regime of a perfect king like Maharaj Yudhisthira. The world was happy in those days because there were kings like Maharaj Yudhisthira to rule over the world. And then Bhagavatam describes, during the reign of Maharaj Yudhisthira, the clouds showered all the water that people needed, and the earth produced all the necessities of man in profusion. Due to its fatty milk bag and cheerful attitude, the cow used to moisten the grazing ground with milk. So, if you want to understand what was the condition of Maharaj Yudhisthira's empire, you can look at these. Bhagavatam is mentioning two important parameters. The weather was very perfect, and so the agriculture was going on very nicely. Prabhupada says the rains, that's not in the control of man, it's not in human power. That's by higher authority, the rain will come. Although we are absolutely dependent on rain coming for our net food, which is, of course, prime necessity. So the weather was very perfect under the reign of Maharaj Yudhisthira, and the cows were in a very good condition. The cows were very happy, they were satisfied and peaceful, and due to their joyful condition, they were muddying the earth with the milk that was coming out of their milk bags. If you will spend time with the cows, you will see that they're very emotional animals, beings. And like we were just traveling, my wife and I, we were in the European countries, and we saw many beautiful cows in the pasturing ground. And we wanted to, like how we do here, we wanted to meet them and exchange affection with them, maybe feed them snacks. And those cows were terrified of us. You could not go near them. Why? Because they're abused. Because they're in a horrible condition. They're being exploited like anything. And so they feel that. And so you can't have any relation with them. Because they're living in terror, actually. They're like, they're practically just waiting to be shipped to the slaughterhouse. It's such a nasty, nasty, horrible situation. And so, when the cows are in such a condition, naturally human society will also be in a poor condition. That's the law of nature. And when the cows are very happy and peaceful and satisfied, then human society can also prosper in all ways. That's one of the secrets of good government that we can learn from Bhagavatam. Therefore, Maharaj Parikshit, he was fighting very fiercely against Kali, who had come to abuse the cow. He raised the sword in a very ferocious way against Kali Maharaj, who was abusing the cow. And so that is good leadership, that is good management, that's a good king. The cow should be protected always, and on that basis, human civilization can prosper. Srila Prabhupada writes, if there is enough milk, enough grains, enough fruit, enough cotton, enough silk, and enough jewels, then why do the people need cinemas, houses of prostitution, slaughterhouses, etc.? What is the need of an artificial, luxurious life of cinema, cars, radio, flesh, and hotels? Has this civilization produced anything but quarreling individually and nationally? Has this civilization enhanced the cause of equality and fraternity by sending thousands of men into a hellish factory and the war fields at the whims of a particular man? It is said here that the cows used to moisten the pasturing land with milk because their milk bags were fatty and the animals were joyful. Do they not require, therefore, proper protection for a joyful life by being fed with a sufficient quantity of grass in the field? Why should men kill cows for their selfish purposes? Why should man not be satisfied with grains, fruits, and milk, which combined together can produce hundreds and thousands of palatable dishes? Why are there slaughterhouses all over the world to kill innocent animals? Maharaj Pritchett, grandson of Maharaj Yudhisthira, while touring his vast kingdom, saw a black man attempting to kill a cow. The king at once arrested the butcher and chastised him sufficiently. Should not a king or executive head protect the lives of the poor animals who are unable to defend themselves? Is this humanity? Are not the animals of a country citizens also? Then why are they allowed to be butchered in organized slaughterhouses? Are these the signs of equality, fraternity, and nonviolence? Therefore, in contrast with the modern, advanced, civilized form of government, an autocracy like Maharaj Yudhisthira's is by far superior to a so-called democracy in which animals are killed and a man less than an animal is allowed to cast votes for another less than animal man. So, very strong words from Srila Prabhupada. There's comments where Srila Prabhupada was asked about voting in the modern democracy. And he would say, we should not vote for the rascals, we should not vote for the rogues. Who are the rogues? Those people who are eating meat, who are hunting women, who are taking intoxication, who are gambling. We should not give these people votes. Prabhupada said, if someone comes asking for your vote, the first question you should ask is, have you read the Bhagavad-gītā? Even Gandhi read the Bhagavad-gītā. Have you read the Bhagavad-gītā? The saintly kings, they're meant to know the science of Sanatana Dharma from Bhagavad-gītā. Do you know the Bhagavad-gītā? If you don't, why should I give you my vote? Prabhupada would say like that. Just one more point we'll read. So we know that in Srimad Bhagavatam, the Kurukshetra war was so devastating. All of the sons of the Pandavas who might have inherited the throne, they were killed. Abhimanyu, the son of Arjuna, he died very valiantly in the Kurukshetra battle. He took a great risk and he was killed. And the 5 sleeping sons of Draupadi, Bhagavatam describes, on the final night of Kurukshetra, after Duryodhana was defeated, then in a very immoral act of revenge, Ashvatthama came to the camp of the Pandavas and he slaughtered everybody. It's against the rules of warfare to come to the enemy camp at night and wield weapons like that. That's absolutely against the rules of civilized warfare, and Ashvatthama did like that. And so all of the sleeping sons of Draupadi were killed, along with many others actually. And the one survivor was the son of Abhimanyu. And that is Maharaj Pritchett. Abhimanyu is the son of Arjuna. Right, so Parikshit was the one surviving. Right, he was protected by the Lord in the womb of Uttara. So before the battle, young Abhimanyu, who was a very young man, maybe less than 20 years old, he was married to Uttara, and Uttara was pregnant. And then Abhimanyu himself, he died in Kurukshetra. And
He was not died, he was killed actually.
I'm sorry?
He was not died, he was killed actually.
I don't understand. Say again?
Abhimanyu was not died, he was killed.
Yes, Abhimanyu was killed, that's right. Yes, he was killed. He died, he was killed, and he died. There's a difference? Anyway, he fought in the war and he was killed. That's right. And so, by cheating. That's right. That's right. It was immoral how Abhimanyu was killed in the war. So Parikshit was the survivor, and he became the emperor after Yudhisthira, the grandson. So Parikshit is the grandson of Arjuna. So in this section of Bhagavatam, Maharaj Parikshit is touring his kingdom because he understood that the influence of Kali had entered his kingdom, which was a very unpalatable thing. And as a righteous ruler, he thought he has to rectify the situation. Maharaj Parikshit, who could fight 1,000 enemies single-handedly, thus pacified the personality of religion and the earth. Then he took up his sharp sword to kill the personality of Kali, who is the cause of all irreligion. And Prabhupada writes, it's a very strong purport. This age of Kali will certainly be full of all activities of Kali, but this does not mean that the leaders of society, the executive heads, the learned and intelligent men, or above all the devotees of the Lord, should sit down tightly and become callous to the reactions of the age of Kali. In the rainy season, certainly there will be profuse rainfalls, but that does not mean that men should not take means to protect themselves from the rains. It is the duty of the executive heads of state and others to take all necessary actions against the activities of Kali or the persons influenced by the age of Kali. And Maharaj Parikshit is the ideal executive head of the state, for at once he was ready to kill the personality of Kali with his sharp sword. The administrators should not simply pass resolutions for anti-corruptional steps, but they must be ready with sharp swords to kill the persons creating corruptions from the angle of vision of the recognized Shastras. The administrators cannot prevent corrupt activities by allowing wine shops. They must at once close all shops of intoxicating drugs and wine and force punishment, even by death, for those who indulge in habits of intoxication of all descriptions. That is the way of stopping the activities of Kali as exhibited herein by Maharaj Parikshit, the Mahatā, the one who can fight with many thousands at the same time. So, yes, so here it is written like that the head of state should be so fierce to fight against the influence of Kali and to maintain religious principles. Any questions or comments? Any discussion? Or any points of reflection?
Government is selling the wine.
Sorry, Prabhu?
Government is selling the wine.
Government is selling the oil.
Wine.
Government is selling the wine. Right. So Kali is not just in the state. The head of the state is also number one rascal, rogues, bogus people, purveyors of irreligion, purveyors of Kali Yuga. Very horrible condition. The success of the Krishna consciousness movement will be when we can also produce Arjunas and Yudhishtiras and Maharaj Parikshit people, qualified men like this, who can be righteous rulers and leaders to control society in accordance with Sanatana Dharma. Yes, Mataji?
Considering that we're moving into, going deeper into the age of Kali, but Prabhupada said that there will be a golden age, 10,000 years. So, how is that manifesting? Do you have any, in terms of how we talk about how things are deteriorating, but how are things coming in to the golden age that Prabhupada said would be happening?
Well, individually and collectively, as devotees are taking more and more shelter, surrendering to the Lord, taking shelter of the holy name, taking shelter of our Shastra, progressively following the path of Sanatana Dharma, to that extent it's a golden age. So we can feel that individually and collectively, how people are taking to Krishna consciousness, that's golden.
So that means that for us as devotees, then our chanting, our prasad distribution, our preaching, bringing more people in, as you can see in this temple here, the more people come, then that brings in the golden age.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah. What do you think?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for your thoughts.
Hare Krishna, thank you.
About the golden age, I was thinking about it, and I thought that now life becomes more and more difficult for materialistic people as well. Because many people are losing jobs, are losing their dear ones, it's more restricted. Basically, it's not becoming easier, and there is a bigger gap of rich and poor, middle class becomes less rich. So it all makes people think more of spiritual things because they cannot rely on material things as before. There is less security. And so in this way, from a material point of view, it's deteriorating actually. And it's a good basis for spiritual life. So we're making golden age, it means prosperity, everything is good. But it could be that actually nothing is so good. But mentality becomes like more aware that I'm not from this material world. There is no security here. I cannot relate on things. So who am I? What am I? So these first questions they come. And they try to find shelter someplace else. Because before it was too secure for them to think of spiritual things. They didn't need that. And now they need it more, and they will need it even more. Because it's becoming worse. The wars are coming closer to them. Less money is coming closer to them. All the situations that were someplace else are now coming to people's doorsteps. So they need to think more where to find peace of mind in different bad situations also. So I think we may not think of golden age. Golden age may be something different than what we think.
That's a good point. Just now we were visited America, and some of the maybe one yatra in particular, the devotees were saying like that. They were saying, this pandemic situation, it really made many local people very inquisitive. Like the stress and the difficulty, all the hardships connected to the COVID pandemic, made a lot of people that you might otherwise think like, they probably wouldn't be interested in Krishna consciousness. So many people were coming to the temple, were interested, they were inquiring, You know, what do the devotees have to say? Like that. So I think it's very true what you said. Okay, 7 o'clock. Maybe we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for your attention. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavad-gītā ki jai. Śrīla Prabhupada ki jai.